Good afternoon, y'all. I got an exciting one here today. Hi, my name is John Washington, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Flossin Media, your host for this series, a Black Beat podcast where we take an unapologetically black approach to topics and issues that impact our community. On today's episode, we continue our series of environmental justice as part of the campaign we call Earth Needs Allies. This campaign is in collaboration with Flossin Media and the Soul District Business Association for the Soul District's annual fundraising event, the MLK Dream Run. This year, MLK Dream Run takes place on Saturday and Sunday, September 17th and 18th, and is presented by U.S. Bank, CARE Oregon, and the University of Oregon. It will also be hosted at PCC Cascade Campus in Portland, Oregon, on Killingsworth. Today on Black Beat, Dr. Adrienne Bennings, who recently joined Portland Community College this summer as the college's 8th president. Wow, but sister, well, man, I'll get through this, but I really want to just break it down. And also PCC's first prominent female president in its history. Woo! And that's saying something serious. She also generously agreed to allow PCC Cascade Campus to be the host for this 11th annual MLK Dream Run weekend celebration, and thank you very much, sister. Dr. Bennings has also taught courses in human resource development, academic development and retention, and small business development. She has held progressively higher level positions in higher education and for more than 15 years. Her educational background includes a doctorate of philosophy. Damn, I missed that part. Oh, girl, we going in higher education. Yes, exactly. Philosophy, right? Administration from the Texas Tech University, a master's of science in business administration with a human resource concentration from Wayland Baptist University, and a bachelor's of science in agricultural development from Texas A&M University. Welcome, Dr. Bennings. And let me tell you, you landed in the right place. You can't figure out how you got here with all this, girl. This is the right place for the pioneer.
Already, I'm glad to be here.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, wow. Well, I am...
Where'd you grow up, all that kind of stuff?
I'll tell you what, I'm Air Force. Some would say, military brat. My dad was in the Air Force, and I was actually born in Madrid, Spain.
Wow.
And, by way of our life, we landed in Lubbock, Texas. And people ask, where is Lubbock, Texas? And I always go to West Texas. But then when I say Patrick Mahomes, they're like, I can make a correlation, right? And so I'm athletic by nature. So military home, raised in a Christian home. Parents were pastors.
Right on.
But also, athletics is in my blood because I like to share that. I was a middle child, so I became very competitive in terms of performance and just wanting to do something and set myself apart from my siblings first and foremost.
Oh, you heard that voice early.
Uh-huh.
Is that what that was?
I heard it since 6th grade. And so one thing that I've been doing is athletics is in my blood, but it also translates into my professional work. But I did track and field, basketball, volleyball, all that in high school, but in college was track and field, and I did 100-meter hurdles, long jump, triple jump, mile relay.
I have to come at you about them hurdles, girl.
Oh,
you'd be mad at brother. Oh, 1, 2, 3, snap.
1, 2, 3, snap. That's right. And then ended up having the opportunity to do it on the professional circuit, but I got to choose my event, and so I did long jump professionally.
Right on.
And so that's me in a snapshot in terms of my background and how I got to where I am today.
So you always had that fire. It sounds clear. I mean, was you running when you was a kid? Was you running from something or to something? What was you doing?
I was always going. I've always been energetic, and I've always been motivated, but I've always been a person and a child that just wanted to excel and set myself apart. That's just who I am.
So in respects to you and your family, I mean, what number were you in your...
I was number 2.
You was number 2. Mm-hmm. So who was faster than you?
Nobody in my family. But I had aunts and uncles who ran fast, and they would always tell me about my scores, and they would give me a history of what they used to run when I would, come up with some personal bests. But yeah.
She said, wasn't nobody else faster than her in the family.
No.
Well, unfortunately, in my family, it was the same for me.
Okay.
Yeah. I was biggest, baddest, strong. Well, actually, I had sisters that was bigger than me, though. They was kind of bad, too, but too bad they couldn't play football, right? So how did you come to your career? I mean, how did you arrive to this? What made you decide to come to the role of Portland and arrive here?
Well,
There's two
backtrack.
parts in that question.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll start with like how did I come to my
the career
career,
path, yeah.
and so I'll just say life happened.
Yeah.
I was doing professional track and field and found myself at a point where I became a single mom, and it set me down for a couple of years. But I tried to get back at it, but then my focus shifted because I now had a young daughter to care for, and so at that point I said I needed to do something to get into the professional realm to work to maintain a life, and so that's how I got into working first and foremost after having gone to college, after having done professional track and field. And then what happened was my first job was in the higher education realm.
Right, yep.
And so I love learning. I started college at age 16. And so learning, I always loved to learn. And so I was in this environment where I thrived on seeing others learn. And I was like, I've got to be here. I've got to stay here. But there's more for me to accomplish. I started as a secretary.
It's coming out already. Competitive edge. Yeah, and I often wonder, and I'm sort of a spiritualist, so most of the cats are running, and we always say, mediocrity is just something somebody might have been born with someplace else, but when you hear it, the voice inside of you to see it, mediocrity is no longer acceptable.
Right. I don't know what that is.
Yeah. Oh, girl, you ain't right. So unpack a little bit more of that for me.
Sure.
In terms of how did it all happen for you? I mean, was it easy? Did you have to employ some skill sets that where most of us don't know much about? Where'd the fire come from? What drives it?
Right.
What's the center?
I would say that the fire came from and still resonates from a place of adversity and a place of rejection in terms of coming into a career and in an industry, in an environment where I worked, where there were not many who looked like me that rose too far in the ranks beyond a manager. And so at a certain point, I had my MBA, and I said, I'm going to get my PhD because no one can say that I didn't advance out of my own, with their help.
Yeah.
I wanted to do something on my own accord. And I tried to advance there at Texas Tech beyond where I was, and I would just say systems.
Yeah.
And structures, in my mind, prevented that, and I said, I'm not limiting myself. There's somewhere else for me to go.
Yes, ma'am.
And that led me from Texas to Michigan. And I was in Michigan as a first-time president, also the first black and first female president in the history of the college, first person of color ever.
Wow.
In a rural Battle Creek, Michigan.
Wow.
And I had some challenges there. But that is what also further... I call it a refined in the fire type of motivation.
Yeah, oh girl, now we're talking.
So the trials and adversity that I faced there, they could sometimes take me out and wipe me out, but it's like the second wind in a race where you're like, you know what, here's the finish line, suck it up, get across that finish line. And after a certain while, it came to a point where I made the conscious decision at every stage of my professional journey to not compromise, but also not allow people to shape the narrative of my value and my work to their standards, because what I was and who I am was beyond what they could possibly comprehend.
Wow.
So that's what led me here, because it came to a point where I recognized, even though after 2 years I was at a point where I needed to make a change.
Yeah.
My time here, my season here is not what I thought it would be, but if I don't make a decision, I'm not going to be successful in the capacity of leading a college to the extent that I believe I could. So Portland happened.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you how it happened.
Come on.
So you get all these recruitment emails, and so I got an email, and it was like, hey, there's this job, and it was from a search firm. We encourage you to apply or nominate.
Yeah.
As soon as I got the email, I said to myself, should I apply for this job? Boom, in my inbox, my dean, I have to give him credit, Dr. Baskin sent me this job. And he said, Dr. Bennings, you ought to apply for this job. As soon as I got my email and thought that to myself, and I said, I'm going to look into it. So that's a long story short. I stepped out, took the risk, and I was like, I'd only been president 2 years, but there's something for me at PCC.
Girl.
And there were so many signs and just things along the way. And then my husband and I consulted, and I never make a decision professionally wise without him, because that impacts his job and that
Lucky
impacts
man.
his,
Lucky man.
I needed his support.
Yeah, and sister, as I'm sitting here listening to you, and I'm sorry, because I come from that age where those what do they call them, he, she, whatever that thing is. I was wondering when they was going to insert sister into that, we Georgia boys, sister, but I can't help but to hear the spiritual undertone. And I don't even think it's an undertone with you, girl. I think it's right out in front, that thing that got you in running. and I'm really glad to hear it, and I hope my listeners are really listening intensely to you, because I think, we will be tried. And so often I heard you, as your story progressed, that you had some exposure and understanding the resurrection, running for that line,
Right.
Get to it, you understand. So that sports energy, that foundation, I think, at least for me, it gave me that upward backbone.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? To believe that at least if I can punch it over,
Right.
then therefore life must, be similar to some degree,
Right.
because it's made it the same kind of realities, right?
Yeah,
Run
yeah.
for the line, right? So, sister, how is PCC tracking? Well, no, before I get down to PCC, you hear what our campaign is. Life needs allies.
Yeah.
I mean, Earth needs allies, right? And so, speak to us a little bit about that. Your understanding of this whole eco green kind of, because I don't know about with you. I make a point of this every on my show, is that whenever I hear this green eco, I think about white, but then I think about them African brothers, because I got a bunch of my people running around here working, and they tell me where they come from. They ran to school for 10 miles to school, So they must do something about Earth.
Yeah. They knew something, yeah.
Yeah. So speak to us a little bit about what your insight is about that.
Well, I'll start off saying you don't know what you don't know. And growing up, in the Black culture, it's not widely known, the awareness of our role, or even insight onto how our behaviors and how the environment is impacted by things around us, right? Mm-hmm. And so coming into this position, I will tell you that PCC is the most sustainable institution I've ever worked at. Mm. So coming in, when I hear going green, I was like, what? I think recycle. I was like, okay, I'll throw a few bottles in the recycle bin. I'll throw a few cans in the recycle bin. Yeah. But it's more than that. Like here in the state, I see that the state is taking a more intentional approach in terms of intentional allies, intentional Earth allies, so to speak. And so, I've had experiences with Earth Day, that sort of thing. I am very interested in continuing to learn about the sustainability efforts at PCC, such as the Bee Certified Campus, where we, want to preserve the natural pollinators and advance the plants in the area, but also really preserve the systems of without pesticides. So there's more to green than. At first I was like, well, I don't have a green thumb, and it was nothing to do with that. So, when I say you don't know what you don't know, there's a lot that I've learned, and there's yet a lot for me to learn about what it truly means to be on this earth as an ally to the earth, but also knowing that my impact and my behaviors shape the outcome and the future of the earth and the sustainability for our generation.
Wow. Sister, it's kind of interesting, Doctor, that how I learned about it in the Northwest, coming out of the East, I had this birth up there in BC, bought some properties up above Seattle and Bellingham and all that. And I happened to buy 40 acres up there in a little small town called Alger, right? Mm-hmm. And so, no big deal. It was just something that I just did with some money, right? So I went back, Jersey, came back. My dad was getting sick a little bit, right? And I was retiring, and so I wanted to build a log cabin with him, right? So there was a little country white boy that lived across the road, right? He would come to me every time he see me pull up on the property. He would say, Mr. Washington, you have a lot of money on your property. And I go, well, dude, I'm out of Jersey, right? I said, do I? Really? What is that, right? So at some point in time, he says to me, well, if you just let me cut down 5 acres of those trees that you got out there, you could probably get about 100 racks. And I go, what? He says, yeah, and there's some Russians down in the Bellingham Harbor that's buying wood right now, right, $1 a board foot. So I was a little bit weary that day. I must have said something to him, but I must have gave him a tentative nod or something. So I come back about a week or two later. This boy done cleared out 5 acres of trees, right? So many trees I ain't never seen this much wood. I had enough wood to build a log cabin and everything, sit down there, plus get the money. He had me a check for 80 racks when I got back, right? So I wanted to go see what he did. So that morning, I drove back up to the property, and I inched up on the border of where he started cutting, and I could hear these noises like a tam of a drum, boom, 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 right? Boom, boom, boom. And I could hear some people down there crying. So I walk up over the crest, and I stand on one of these big old logs about the size of this table that this boy done cut, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm looking over the hill, and there's all these Indian people and some white people down there smudging and all that. And then they looked up to me and, well, you're from Jersey. So, what y'all ass doing down there? That's the first thing I was, damn, this is my dirt down there. What y'all doing down there? And I hear this one lady go, how could you? Woman, how could I what? But how could you cut them? And I'm going, lady, speak English to me. Get your ass up from down in there, right? How could you cut the old growth? Now I'm from New Jersey. Oh, what? A tree? How could you cut them? Well, the Indians and all that came, and that was my spiritual journey into the Northwest that way. Yeah, they wound up coming to get me, smudging me, taking me as sweat lodge, the Lummi Indians, all that. And yeah, I was embraced into the Northwest through, I guess it was sinning or something. I wasn't sure what, but I learned, I got my birth in the Northwest through that process of understanding the whole ecosystem and the relationship between the natives and the people who live here in the earth and all that. It was kind of a harsh lesson to learn that way, sis, but I never wound up big in the building that log cabin, but I did cash that check. But anyway, how is PCC tackling education and workforce training these days?
Goodness. So, I'm so excited about how PCC is approaching this. Of course, this work long happened before I came on board. But one of the things that PCC has been very intentional about is climate action and planning, right? In terms of how do we respond to what's happening in our climate through education? How do we respond to what's happening in our climate through outreach? But also, how do we respond to that in our operations? And so I have to share this because I've been doing tours of all the facilities. And one of the highlights that I want to share is
now, Dr. Benny, you over all the both of the campuses.
I'm over the whole district.
Oh God, who's the brother that was there before you? There was a woman.
His name was Pulliam.
Pulliam, yeah, okay,
there.
gotcha.
So Mitsui and I think Jeremy Brown and Pulliam.
Well, right on, yeah. But them brothers made some money. They did some heavy money lifts though.
Oh yeah.
When they was here, yeah. They raised some money.
Successful bonds too because of the work that they did.
Yeah.
So I have to highlight it's our OMRIC in terms of manufacturing. It's one of our newest buildings up in, I might say this wrong, Scappoose.
Yeah, Scappoose.
Did I say it right?
Yeah, you said it right.
Good.
Yeah.
So I'm still learning how to pronounce certain things.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that is really interesting about the work that is happening there, first and foremost, PCC focuses on LEED certification, right, with energy and the renewable and all that sort of thing.
Yes.
So we have some standards. We have platinum level, silver level, gold level, and one of those sites is Willow Creek. I had the opportunity to go and view it, and you have the flow of air that is more natural, the utilization of solar panels that really reduce the energy consumption, but also there's goals in terms of reducing carbon emissions, right?
There you go.
And I know that's a state initiative too, because when I came here, I was like, we've got so many electric cars around here, so I know it's a statewide initiative. I need to invest in an electric car. But anyway.
Well, they just passed a $100 million bond for building charging stations throughout Oregon.
They did.
Yes.
So that's statewide.
Yeah, that's statewide.
Yeah. So one of the things that we do is through the Eco Social Justice Grant, students have contributed a little over $1.1 million in fees to really advance those initiatives through PCCIE bikes. Versus vehicles and learning gardens where we have an ecosystem of learning, but the food that is grown through those systems is translated to meet food insecurity basic needs. So, and I had the opportunity to tour. I have to share this. It's the Portland Metropolitan Workforce Training Center, where we're also going to have some affordable housing. But when you walk on the site, you see all of this wood, and it's we're building it under the certification, a timber certification of some sort. And I was like, it's laminated timber, where it's layers and layers of timber. I've never seen a building like that. And I was like, what is the life of this building? And what is the life of this building going to be? And they were telling me it was going to be about 50 years.
Wow.
So in our planning and capital construction, we integrate strategies to really build to renew energy, to limit hazardous waste in the environment, but also promote that sustainability within the communities that we're building.
Right on.
And so that's
But that was part of your legacy. That was a little bit. Was that yours, or was that already implemented as part of the plan?
That was already implemented as part of the plan.
Yeah. Because I think I remember hearing one of them. The sister that was over at PCC over here, who was from South Carolina. What's her name? I forgot her name. It'll come to me before we leave here. Karen. Yeah, she was something else. She was also fascinating.
She was amazing.
Karen, she's very special people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. So, as we mentioned earlier, what is PCC's environmental footprint, And what does the college do to operate more sustainability or sustainably?
Well, I'm still learning about the expanse of the college's footprint, but I would say that in terms of the sustainability piece, that still translates largely to the education. I think when I think of the ecosystem piece, like the higher education realm is just one piece of this puzzle. Mm-hmm. And there's a desperate need, I would just say, to really link that to the K through 12 sector in terms of educating and really creating that curriculum and that transition of how that the youth can prepare for a sustainable environment. That's one piece. In terms of our footprint, we're involved in various organizations that have sustainability and environmental justice as components of their philosophy and values. Right. The reach of that is expansive. I will say that the prior president, Mitsui, was more heavily involved in the policy making.
Yeah, I remember seeing him definitely in policy.
And that was his wheelhouse. And so I would say that the depth of the footprint is beyond my comprehension. Right. But I do know that given the reputation of PCC, that it is significant because we have impacted the various quadrants that we're in, but also have really connected to organizations and communities to help advance those initiatives.
Now I'm gonna change up on you. Now I'm gonna pull a little fast switch on you.
Okay, I'm gonna see if I can roll with you.
That's how I know you can handle it. Speak to me about love.
Love.
L-O-V-E.
L-O-V-E.
Speak to me about love.
Well, I tell you what, I operate from my philosophy. I'll tell you that I think has largely contributed to my success is, outside of being Black, I approach every person, every group with love, meaning that I give them what I call the grace card, not the race card, right? And so I give them the grace card from this standpoint because everyone that I come in contact with, I don't know their story. They don't know my story, but if I approach them in love, meaning, and I'm not talking about the huggy, kissy, feely, touchy, I'm just talking about from a standpoint of knowing that they are human and knowing that they might have had faults or might have experiences that might have made their life difficult. My approach is to love them. And so that's one thing. In terms of loving, I think that there has to be an approach of a reflection of how you love yourself reflected in others, right? And so I struggle with that through a period of my time because I've had some, adverse situations where I had, I would say, discrimination and systemic oppression perpetuated by whites. And it's hard to love in that type of environment. You got the educational hat, but then you got the, boy, I wish you would, they don't know me. Yeah, right? Then you got to reel it back in.
Don't you know who I am?
Right, then you got to reel it back in. Yeah. And so I think that when I hear love, and my philosophy on love is really just embracing or loving or giving people grace. And it's kind of like starting a class. Like I used to tell my students, you start in the class with an A. It's up to you to mess that up. And so it's my intention to just really approach with being really open and approachable, but also understanding of individuals as humans, but not forgetting that there are challenges specific to me or other people because of their race or gender.
Speak to me about death.
About death? I don't always see death in terms of a physical death. So take, for example, trees with leaves that fall and trees still being rooted, dead but standing. You know what I'm saying? I see death in a number of ways. I've experienced death in my family when my mom died from colon cancer at a young age. She was 58. But I've also experienced death in my own life when I was going through a situation where, I had some racial things happening on the job, and I empowered those people who were oppressing me to kill me internally, right? And so I had to remind myself and gird myself up to come to a place to not, I'll just tell you, I've never found myself there again because I said that'll be the last time that someone kills me the way that they did. And when I say kills me, I was actually, that was back in 2007 or 6 where I was diagnosed with clinical depression because I allowed people and systems to kill me. But looking at me today and seeing the advancement of my career, you'd never know that I died to get to where I could live.
Each day.
Right.
Speak to me about life, sister.
About life?
About life.
I'm just going to say life happens, right? And I've learned that through life, it's really a matter of, number one, decisions and choices that we make. But number two, those things outside of our control, it becomes about how we don't react, but how do we respond to that? And so life is not easy, life is hard, life is not fair, but I tell you, one of the most consistent things about life is we each have the same amount of time to live each day. Like if you wake up there, everyone has 24 hours. There's no more than 24 hours in a day. And so in terms of life, it's a matter of what can I do intentionally to make the most out of life as if this was the last moment I was going to live. And I was just sharing today in a setting, and I shared with a in-service at the campus, I said, you got to rise. And I said, rise is rising intentionally to serve in excellence every day. And so that is who I am, and that is the way I live, because there are people around me who are dying and don't live because they haven't had that. Sometimes they just need a person to motivate them. Sometimes they need someone to pull them up. Sometimes they need someone just to encourage them, or sometimes they need just a shift in their environment. And that's what I bring through my energy and my presence.
You bring a whole lot more than that.
Oh.
You know, and, but you know, I had to scratch out that philosophy aspect of who you are.
Yeah.
You know, I had to at least invite that in,
Yeah.
because that's that sort of that Zen kind of thing that's in a guy. You know,
Yeah.
you know, sister, I'm enjoying myself so much with this interview with you. It's just fascinating.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of a rare one for me. I mean, it really is, because I think you and I have a lot in common in terms of how we see the world. You know, and some of the drive that is required for the internal individual to be able to survive in this element, in this environment. You know, and so it's just so nice to be able to share and engage in that dialogue. So, tell me, in your mind, tell us how you feel about health and wellness. How does that play a role in higher education and small business development?
So, in health and wellness, I think, is a critical role in various aspects, not just higher education, but in life in general, right? But in higher education, I believe health and wellness is critical across physical health and wellness, mental health and wellness, spiritual health and wellness, social health and wellness. It's this spectrum of wellness that is impactful to a person's experience. And so I think that what needs to happen and what needs to continue to happen in the community college realm or higher education realm, first and foremost, is more attention and detail to mental wellness, especially with our populations of color.
Thank you.
I'll tell you why. Because even as an adult, and even growing up, and even having gone to a community college, I knew I needed help, but I wasn't comfortable seeking help, just even in talking and having a voice of support or mentorship or comfort, because there was no one that looked like me that I felt could relate to sharing and imparting into me what I needed, because I couldn't relate in terms of what I saw.
Yeah.
So the mental health aspect is very much needed. I would say just my heart goes out in terms, and I have a heart for people of color, but also men of color and our young males, because they are, and I say, an endangered species.
Thank you for acknowledging that, sister.
Yeah, I have a husband who's black, I have a son who's black, I have a father who's black, and even though society has mistreated and tried to take away the kingdom of our men, it's incumbent upon me as a black woman to do what I can do to support and uplift and perpetuate programs and initiatives to uplift. One of them such being, I used to be...
Too bad we didn't have captions right about now. I'm going to have to repeat that one. What did you say? That would be a good one. Thank you, sis. Yeah.
So and then health, I think, is very important, because, outside of the pandemic, and I always draw back to the black culture, because that's where I am. We grew up eating soul food, frying food, and then having histories of diabetes and cancer in our families. And there was the lack of knowledge to really understand the long-term impacts of what we eat, what we subject ourselves to, and even the energy that we allow ourselves to be around. I'm very mindful of my energy.
Ooh.
And so I don't allow everyone into my circle. My circle is probably big as the eye, the dot over an eye. You know what I'm saying? And so it's very critical that as a community college, not just in higher education, how can we advance as the community's college? We've got to cover environmental sustainability. We've got to cover health. We've got to cover education. We've got to cover business, workforce, industry.
Yeah.
All these things.
Yeah.
So it's very important.
Yeah, very, very
Not enough
important.
attention.
Hey, sister, I appreciate you, Doctor, putting the lens on that because you laid it how it's supposed to be. Woo! This has been one of them days, but I got a whole lot of joy and love in my heart. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but if I don't know what y'all listening to. Hey, Jarrell, you've been sitting over there a little bit, Jarrell, being a little bit quiet. He's a young man that works for me on this podcast. I know he has perspective on some things. He's in college himself right now down at U of O. So, hey, man, you want to light a little fire here, or add a little something, or you just she put you to bed? You're done.
Be honest, I was just basking in knowledge.
Yeah, man.
And
Yeah,
really just
yeah, the
enjoying
sister lady, didn't she?
listening to you and hearing everything you had to say. I really don't have much to add on top of everything that was said.
I appreciate it. You're too kind.
Ooh, we've come to an end on this interview, and y'all, thank you for coming to Black Beat today. Dr. Bennings just laid it out for y'all, and if y'all don't see this woman coming, y'all got some issues, but I'm so glad she's here because I'm going to run interference for her the whole way there.
Already.
So y'all ain't got no issues because y'all know Big Bubba, y'all know where I live, and this Media Foundation will tell y'all how it really is. And so we do appreciate you, sister, for coming on deck and being a part of this process, but a lot of work to be done ahead of us, but I'm looking forward to the heavy lift.
Yeah, glad to be
Respect.
here.
My pleasure, sister.
Thank you.
Yeah. Asante, everybody. Woo! Yes.